Mr. President, I've spoken before about my constituent, my fellow Texan Elon Musk, here on the floor, and recounted the fact that it was really probably at least 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, when he came to my office here in Washington, D.C., and said he had a new company called SpaceX, and he wanted to compete for the business of NASA and in commercial space. And as it turned out, Mr. Musk had to sue the U.S. government just for the privilege of competing with the United Space Alliance, I believe it is called, the existing entity that had an exclusive contract on space flight with the U.S. government. I read recently that now SpaceX carries about 90% of the payloads in the world into space. It's a remarkable testament to not only his incredible innovation, but resilience and persistence to build such a successful company. And that's not the only one he's built. Tesla is headquartered in Texas. I've been out to the Gigafactory right outside of Austin, Texas, and he is building cars that are very popular and employing an awful lot of Texans, which I'm all in favor of, and they continue to grow and hire more of my constituents. Mr. Musk has done something here in Washington, D.C. in the last couple of months, which is heresy. It's heresy. He's actually said the federal government spends too much. And he said a lot of what the federal government spends is waste and fraud and abuse. And much of it, as we've seen, are things that most of us had no real awareness of. But as he's targeted some of the most egregious examples of waste and abuse of the taxpayer dollar, I think there are many people across the country, certainly where I come from, who have applauded that effort. They feel like this has been long in coming and long overdue. One of the major challenges we face here in Washington, D.C. is that spending money is very popular. And of course, people who spend money, even though it's not theirs, it's the taxpayer dollars, can go home and say, guess what I did for you? And most of it involves spending. But we're now having to come to grips with the fact that we are $36.4 trillion in debt. And we've kicked the can down the road so long that we've run out of road. And indeed, many of us have talked over the years about the fact that this is immoral. We basically are writing checks that our children and grandchildren will have to cash. Somebody is going to have to pay that money back. And now we are spending more money on interest on the national debt than we are to defend the nation, which is a very dangerous set of circumstances given the situation we find ourselves in, which is the most dangerous time since World War II. Now, it's no secret that Elon Musk is perhaps the richest man in the world. I don't begrudge him that. It looks like he's done some amazing things and continues to do so. I know that with that sort of money, he doesn't have to be up here volunteering to do some of the work that needs to be done in terms of identifying the waste and abuse. He could go relax on an island somewhere. He could buy an island. He could do whatever he wants, and he wouldn't have to lift a finger to help anybody else, and he could just live a life of luxury and leisure for the rest of his existence. But I don't believe he's wired that way, and I'm grateful for that, because instead he's volunteering his time to serve not only the President of the United States, but the American people. You don't have to agree with everything that Mr. Musk recommends to recognize that this is an incredible public service, and this is long overdue. identifying all of the waste and abuse and egregious expenditure of taxpayer dollars. In fact, I'm a little shocked that our Democratic colleagues don't join us in this effort. I happen to be a member of what we call the DOGE caucus, the Department of Government Efficiency. We are making recommendations to DOGE to look at different departments of the government and say, can you find savings here? Can you find expenditures that don't make any sense? I'm kind of shocked our Democratic colleagues refuse to join us in that. It seems like in a normal world, they would be concerned about this too. Instead, they just say the status quo is just fine. We don't need to change a thing. $36.4 trillion and counting. And in fact, they seem to be in denial of the fact that President Trump and Republican majorities in both houses were elected on November the 5th. Hopefully that won't continue indefinitely. But what I mention is some of the violence and the acts of vandalism that have occurred around the country that have been focused primarily on Tesla owners. Now, by the way, most of these Teslas aren't owned by Elon Musk anymore. They've been sold to private citizens, and yet they have been the target of a lot of the vandalism and violence that we've seen around the country. Just 2 days ago, police officers found what they called multiple incendiary devices at a local Tesla dealership in North Austin, where I live. Now, this prompted a full bomb squad to respond, and an investigation is still underway. Thankfully, there were no injuries, but it is ridiculous that the state of our public discourse has reached this point. The North Austin Tesla dealership bomb threat, unfortunately, is not the first of its kind. It comes on the heels of another attack in Las Vegas, where several Teslas were set on fire outside of a service center. I have no idea what that was supposed to accomplish. The protesters vandalized the building by spray painting the words, quote, "resist" on the front doors, while at least one protester reportedly threw a Molotov cocktail. Over on the West Coast in Seattle, 4 Cybertrucks were set on fire earlier this month. The Associated Press has reported that there have been at least 50 demonstrations around the country focused on Tesla, while more are planned, not just here in the United States, but around the world in countries like England, Spain, and Portugal. Some Tesla owners have reported incidents of vandalism on their personal vehicles. Some have been even spray painted with swastikas. Now, why anyone would think that would be a good idea is beyond me. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that kind of violence and vandalism of private property is unacceptable. But I know not everybody is speaking up to condemn these attacks. Now, I support the First Amendment. Obviously, I take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. All of us do here in the Congress. And I will defend the right of all Americans to express their views about government, even when they and I may disagree. But the First Amendment, we know, does not protect activities like placing explosive devices or damaging private property. Those are simply crimes. And I would hope that much is obvious. It's certainly understandable and perhaps inevitable that some people will disagree about reducing government spending. Our Democratic friends are the party of government. They got us 40-year high inflation because during the last 4 years, we've seen an unprecedented expenditure of taxpayer dollars, which is inherently inflationary. And every single American has seen an increase in their cost of living and a decrease in their quality of life because they're paying about 21% more today than they did 4 years ago. But there are people who think that spending money without any sort of second thought is a good idea. Maybe people who benefit from that government spending, but they also have a right to express their concerns. I'm not suggesting that they don't. But what is far from understandable, and in fact is inexcusable, is what we're seeing in the examples that I mentioned. This expression of political disagreement in the form of vandalism, destroying private property, and especially using potentially fatal means like the incendiary devices that were found in Austin. We should not hesitate to call this what it is: domestic terrorism. Now, I wish I could say that this kind of behavior is an anomaly and has never happened before and is unlikely to happen again, but unfortunately this has happened before. And it's reminiscent of the violent unrest that plagued our nation with the BLM riots that happened during the summer of 2020. Mr. President, we live in a democratic republic, not a banana republic. We're blessed to live in a country where we value and protect the rights of citizens to speak freely. We live in a country with universal suffrage, where citizens can bring their disagreements with their government officials to the ballot box. But placing bombs and lighting cars on fire is not an appropriate means of expressing dissenting views in a country like the one we are blessed to live in. We are so much better than that. For this reason, I was disappointed to see one of my fellow Texans in our congressional delegation go so far as to condone these kinds of activities. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett recently made comments encouraging violent protests at a virtual rally. She said, and I quote, these are her words, not mine. She said, "All I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down." Well, that could be interpreted any one of a number of ways, but I believe it's wrong to wish on any American, much less a fellow Texan. And I would expect better than this sort of incendiary rhetoric from a member of Congress who was elected to her position because of the very democracy we are fortunate to enjoy. But this isn't the only thing she said recently that has raised eyebrows and resulted in condemnation. Congresswoman Crockett recently commented that our Governor Greg Abbott, who happens to be a paraplegic as a result of a terrible accident years ago, she said that she referred to him as Governor Hot Wheels, presumably because he's in a wheelchair due to an accident decades ago. And then it's Senator Cruz, my colleague, the junior senator from Texas, she said should be knocked over the head, like hard. This is disgraceful, and we should call it for what it is. We have a duty as elected officials to bring out the best in our country, not to take the low road. And particularly, we should not encourage harm against people we don't particularly agree with. This is a disturbing trend in political rhetoric, one that has turned to violence. Again, not for the first time, but we should condemn it and we should shut it down now. These events should serve as a wake-up call that it's past time to turn down the temperature. I believe that all Americans and all Texans deserve better.